Welcome to today's Explainer. We're jumping right into a hidden, highly structured biological marvel happening literally right beneath our feet. We're talking about the secret life of the queen ant. We're going to unpack the fascinating biology, the intense chemical warfare, and the sometimes downright tragic reality of what it takes to rule an insect empire. Okay, let's dive into this because this is the ultimate question of survival, right? What actually happens when the heart of an ant colony stops beating? Think of an ant colony not just as a collection of thousands of individual bugs, but as a single, living, breathing superorganism. And, well, every superorganism needs a beating heart to survive. When that heart stops, the entire society is thrown into a massive existential crisis. But to really grasp that collapse, we've first got to understand the sheer magnitude of the monarch herself. You see, a queen ant is so much more than just a large insect. She is the literal engine of an entire society. Her primary gig? Reproduction, laying thousands, sometimes even millions of eggs over her lifetime just to constantly replenish the workforce. But her role? It isn't just about reproduction. It's about invisible biochemical communication. She regulates the whole society by releasing complex pheromones. Without her, there's absolutely no future. But here's the thing. Not all queens take to the sky to start these future colonies. When we picture queen ants, we usually think of the winged ones, right? The ones that take to the air in a massive mating flight and then shed those wings to start a brand new nest. But nature loves a fascinating anomaly. Enter the ergotoids you see here. These are permanently wingless reproductive adults. Because they literally never develop wings at any point in their lives, they have to disperse entirely on foot. That means they establish new colonies through dependent colony fission. Basically, they just pack up and walk away with a group of loyal workers to start a new spot. And since they don't have to waste energy on flight muscles, their bodies can evolve in some truly mind-bending ways. And this brilliantly illustrates the extreme physical adaptations we see in these wingless queens. Without the need to fly, their morphology, their physical shape, can get incredibly specialized. Take Megalomyrmex forelli, for instance. It develops a massively enlarged gaster purely for boosted reproduction. But my absolute favorite has to be Blephrodata conops. This queen develops this bizarre, enlarged, flat, plug-like head. She actually uses her own head in a process called phragmosis to literally act as a door. She physically blocks a nest entrance with her face to protect her brood from predators. No way, right? Meanwhile, army ant ergotoids just bulk up to massive sizes so they can pump out enough eggs to support colonies of millions. But physical adaptations, well, they're only half the story of a queen's power. Let's pivot from physical biology to the invisible, sci-fi-like chemical warfare that these queens use to dominate their subjects. This is where things get truly wild. It's almost like a conspiracy thriller happening at a microscopic scale. In species with permanently sterile workers, like the pharaoh ant, queens don't just use pheromones to say hello. They use them to actively suppress the development of rivals. And their secret weapon? A highly specific, potent chemical compound. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the specific chemical structure driving this control. Neosumbrine. It's a monocyclic diterpene produced right in the abdominal dew-force gland of fertile, egg-laying pharaoh ant queens. Researchers actually discovered that this single compound is the master key to reproductive dominance. When this pheromone circulates through the colony, it chemically inhibits the daughter workers from rearing new adult sexuals. Simply put, no new rival queens or males can be produced as long as the current queen is healthy and pumping out this signal. And the magic number for this chemical control? It's 10. That stands for 10 queen equivalents. Researchers found this is a critical threshold. Once the dose of neosumbrine reaches the equivalent of 10 queens, it creates such an overwhelming suppressive effect that it actively triggers workers to cannibalize and cull any sexual brood. Yeah, you heard that right. The workers literally eat the larvae that would have grown into competing royalty, which honestly is a brutal but brilliant way to optimize the colony's resources. But if the queen count drops and that pheromone level dips below the threshold, the culling instantly stops and the colony starts raising new queens to ensure their survival. But neosumbrine is a brilliant multitasker. It pulls double duty. So not only does it act as a suppressive agent to halt the rearing of new queens, but it also functions as an attractive queen retinue pheromone. What that means is it actively draws workers in to tend to, groom, and feed the reigning monarch. And this is just a genius evolutionary design. By drawing the workers in close to act as her loyal entourage, the queen ensures that the neosumbrine pheromone rubs off on them, spreading effectively and rapidly throughout the entire colony. So, we've looked at the microscopic chemical warfare that keeps the monarch in power out in the wild. But what if you want to observe this hidden world for yourself? Well, let's hand you the keys to the kingdom. Keeping a captive colony is incredibly popular right now, But if you happen to catch a newly mated queen, you can't just toss her into a giant dirt farm and expect her to thrive. You have to create the absolute perfect, low-stress environment. This right here is the gold standard for starting a colony, the royal test tube setup. It's wonderfully simple, but you gotta do it right. Step 1 is pretty straightforward. You just fill a clean glass test tube about 1/3 to a half full of clean water. For step 2, push a firm cotton plug down until it just contacts the water. It needs to be firm enough so the water doesn't flood the tube, but moist enough that the queen can easily grab a drink. Step 3 is all about being gentle. Just guide the queen into the dry side of the chamber. And finally, step 4, close the open end with a dry, breathable cotton plug. She gets plenty of air, but she can't escape. This perfectly mimics the tight, secure, humid little underground chambers queens dig out in the wild. Once she's safely in there, protecting the monarch requires some serious, strict discipline on your part. There are a few absolute necessities for her survival. First, the tube has to be kept completely dark using a foil or paper sleeve to keep her stress levels down. The room temperature needs to be stable, and most importantly, you must keep that tube strictly away from direct sunlight. Literally just 5 minutes of direct sun can raise the internal temperature of that glass tube enough to boil the queen alive. Not exactly the royal treatment. You also need to protect her from vibrations, like desk speakers, and resist the urge to constantly handle the tube. Patience is absolutely key here. Check on her only occasionally. Because if you do this right, you get a front row seat to a spectacular biological timeline. Let's move to and see how this builds. Because once the queen settles in, she gets straight to work. If we look at a common species like the black garden ant, Lasius niger, the worker life cycle is just incredibly rapid. An egg hatches into a larva in just 10 to 12 days. Then that legless, grub-like larva feeds and grows for another 10 to 14 days before entering the pupal stage. Inside its protective cocoon, it completely restructures itself for 10 to 24 days. Boom! In just a short 6 to 8 weeks, a fully formed adult worker emerges, totally ready to serve the colony. This fleeting, fast-paced flash of a worker's life sets up a seriously jarring biological contrast with their mother. Take a look at this jaw-dropping number, 28.75. That represents 28 years and 9 months. That is the longest recorded lifespan of a single Lasius niger queen kept in laboratory conditions. Almost 3 full decades. So the crucial point is the staggering biological divide happening within the exact same species. You have the worker ant essentially disposable, living a fleeting life spanning just a matter of weeks, or maybe a few short months. They're constantly being replaced as they literally wear themselves out foraging and defending. But on the other side, you have the queen ant. She is a near mythic figure by comparison, reigning for decades. Species like Messer can live 20 to 25 years. The genetic programming that allows a queen to survive for decades while her identical daughters perish in weeks? It's just one of the greatest marvels of the insect world. But as we all know, nothing lasts forever. Even a monarch capable of surviving 3 decades will eventually see her time run out. Which brings us all the way back to our original question. What happens when the decades-long reign finally comes to a tragic end? The death of a colony usually isn't some instant dramatic explosion. It's a melancholy, slow collapse. Whether the queen perishes from old age, disease, or predator, the immediate effect is entirely invisible. Those vital regulating pheromones we talked about, they simply fade away. Without her, no new eggs are laid to replenish the ranks. The current workers will dutifully keep foraging and maintaining the nest, but as the weeks pass, these aging workers just die off one by one. With 0 replacements, the nest empties out. The once thriving society slowly and quietly disappears into the earth. But sometimes the end of a colony isn't natural at all. Sometimes it's an inside job. There is the shocking twist found in the research. In some multi-queen colonies, workers will actively manage their royalty. If there are too many queens competing and draining resources, the workers will intentionally trigger a rebellion. They cull the queens with the goal of leaving just one supreme monarch to optimize the colony. However, as with a lot of violent revolutions, things don't exactly go according to plan. As researchers have noted, and this is a direct quote, the workers get carried away and end up killing all the queens and thus kill off their own colony. By accidentally killing every last royal, these overly aggressive workers instantly doom their own society to that exact slow collapse we just talked about. Talk about a massive backfire. It really leaves us with a lingering thought, doesn't it? In a hidden kingdom balanced on the razor's edge of chemical mind control, decades of dedicated service, and the ever-present threat of a violent worker rebellion, just how fragile is the monarch's rule? The next time you're walking across a lawn or a pavement crack and you see a tiny worker ant scurrying by, I want you to remember the massive, unseen, chemical-driven empire she belongs to, and the decades-old queen resting silently in the dark below. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Now go take a closer look at that hidden world right beneath your feet.